Good evening, everyone. Everybody,
But I need to know what the color is. So
serve yourself a delicious set of food and get seated. Food is ready. Our plan is to get the food, find yourself a good seat, and be ready for a very brief, about 10-minute presentation while you're enjoying your dinner. Please go ahead.
your grandkids are up there?
I'm not an engineer. I barely know how to rock it. I don't know if fans are concerned. They're not a concern. Well, more was way back highway. What's fans? So I didn't.
Okay, well, I think maybe sometime, it's kind of like
Yeah, but it's not facts. There's some whisper that
there are these there's many other ways. They go right. Just the individual people move it. They basically
Sorry? Where do you live? I heard you live in Seattle.
So as I promised, I wanted you to enjoy your food while we're preparing for presentation. I would like to take this opportunity to thank our sponsor, Panasonic Corporation, for their generous support that made this event possible. We have a brief presentation by Mr. Stephen Lynam of Panasonic Corporation in Japan. Before that, I'd like to also acknowledge the contribution by Cardio EX company. They were kind to also to contribute to all the costs associated with bringing a very esteemed group of cardiovascular professionals to this meeting. We're very pleased to have you. As you probably saw in your agenda, we took advantage of this generous donation to also hold our SHAPE board meeting, which was about an hour and a half earlier. This meeting is very much geared toward science, reviewing the latest development in the arena of cardiovascular disease, particularly atherosclerotic cardiovascular disease detection and treatment and ultimately prevention. We've not had the kind of luxury that we were hoping to have, and that is the participation of various companies to make this easier on us. But we're running on a very tight budget. The SHAPE organization is a grassroots organization. There was no ancestors, there was no affiliation with any established entity. But we're pleased that Panasonic Corporation found merit and found our good place to contribute. To appreciate their contribution, we have provided a brief time for Mr. Lyman to present, in fact, to tell us what Panasonic Corporation is going to do for their healthcare division. So this is not really cardiovascular. So with that introduction, Mr. Lyman, the podium is yours. Please feel free to entertain us with your 3D TV and 3D. We don't have 3D goggle here, so feel free.
Thank you, Dr. Nagaki. So actually, this is the third chance that we've had to sponsor an event here, so we're very happy to do this event. Okay, so I think we have a video first.
I don't know how to turn the video on.
So we have a video first, and then after that I'll talk for about 3 to 4 minutes about what we're doing here in healthcare.
Do we have a sound here?
Yes.
No.
Pragmatic ideas.
Light ideas.
Creative ideas.
Building ideas. Google ideas.
Ideas for people. We are a company of innovation and inspiration, of pragmatism and skill that enhances every aspect of life. We are Panasonic, a company of ideas. Electrifying ideas that bring the main event to Main Street. Visionary ideas that go beyond ordinary light bulbs to provide entire solutions for the world's great computer terminals.
Modern ideas.
Like our mini camera that reimagines the size, shape, and power of digital images. Or our high-definition cameras record shuttle launches for NASA.
Ideas for business.
Like Workio digital imaging systems that copy, scan, fax, and email digital documents around the office and around the world. Powerful ideas. Like the Panasonic Toughbook, a proven performer for the armed forces, law enforcement agencies, and firefighters. And we created a revolution by making the next generation of wearable, wireless computers. We provide security ideas for the Vatican. And our ingenious iris recognition technology secures government buildings and is more reliable than DNA.
Design ideas.
Music ideas.
Lasting ideas.
In homes and businesses, governments and global corporations, Panasonic conceives and cultivates the ideas for systems, solutions, and technologies to enhance life. Panasonic's new digital storage ideas let you record home movies on an SD memory card the size of a postage stamp. And that same card brings new life to an array of innovative products, including Palm's latest handheld.
Ideas for industry.
Panasonic's inventive ideas for the automotive industry also bring DVD, audio, and video entertainment to General Motors. Our hard disk storage systems reinvent in-flight entertainment for Airbus and Boeing.
Ideas that matter.
Environmental ultimately safe ideas like our longer-lasting batteries drive Toyota's electric car into the future. Our engineering ideas helped Apple reimagine their best-selling desktop computers. And systems ideas for stadiums like Pat Bell bring coaching technology to the dugout and the game to the stands, while our high-definition broadcast systems bring it to life in your living room. We create ideas that promise, ideas that deliver, ideas that make a difference. Panasonic, ideas for life.
So that gives you an idea of what Panasonic is doing, but I wanted to share a little bit with you about what we're doing in the area of healthcare. So here you can see, actually I come from Panasonic Shikoku Electronics. This is a subsidiary company of Panasonic Corporation, which will be renamed on October 1st. We will become Panasonic Healthcare Corporation. So this is one very big move that we're making into the healthcare market. Some people know, but most people don't, that actually Panasonic has about $1.5 to almost $2 billion worth of healthcare sales every year. But most of it is not under the Panasonic brand at this time. So that's what we'd like to share with you a little bit more. So Panasonic Group, of course, Panasonic now is very close to a $100 billion company. Our main business is up on the top. We made an announcement 2 months ago that actually the bottom part here will become our new areas of focus. And healthcare is becoming a very important part of this. And when this was announced 2 months ago, the second step of this announcement just happened 2 days ago, where Panasonic made the bid to procure 100% of Sanyo and the Panasonic Electric Works, which are the other two arms in Panasonic that produce for healthcare. So this will all be merged into one company, which is called Panasonic Healthcare. Just to let you know our history, of course, Panasonic is almost 100 years old. We've been producing hearing aids for over 60 years. We were the market leader in Japan for several years. Right now we're probably ranked number 3. If we look at the ultrasound systems, we've been producing ultrasound for more than 35 years. This is our very first ultrasound system 35 years ago, which was actually OEM production for Philips at that time. So at this moment, we do produce for 2 of the top 4 makers. So of course, since it's our OEM customers, I can't really let you know who it is, but you can check on the Japanese website, you can see who they are. We will be focusing, our next generation here, we're focusing on 3 areas. One is the in-hospital work assistance. This is looking at the robotics and trying to improve the workflow in different hospitals and trying to save costs globally for healthcare. Second area we're looking at is home healthcare, which is looking more at the anti-aging, like helping with the hearing aids and different types of purifying things that you put into the home, and try to help people get out of the hospital and out of the clinics and back into their home. So we have a lot of robotic assistance items, like there's a rehabilitation robot to help people do rehabilitation at home. There's a special type of a bed which becomes a wheelchair. It's a robotic bed. So there's several technologies which we're focusing on right now, which will be coming out in the next 5 years. The third area we're looking at is early diagnosis and medical treatment. And I think this is where it's very important for us to be one of the sponsors of SHAPE. And because of course we recognize that your organization is looking at the prevention of disease and trying to screen for disease. And from Panasonic's side, of course, we'd like to support that in the future. If we look at, of course, the blood glucose monitors, we at this moment have 25% of the world market manufactured by Panasonic for the SMDG. Of course, this is produced under somebody else's name. And if you can recognize the color, you know whose name that is. Point of care testing, we're looking at HSCRP, HbA1c, and then we're looking at all kinds of different markers. One thing also we've invested in recently is producing teeth, which has become a very big market for Panasonic just recently. This is just to give you a feeling of all the different products that Panasonic has had in the different divisions. You can see that they're spread over 3 different companies, but as of 2 days ago, this will be changing very soon. And if you look at what we're doing in North America, this is a slide which I received from Panasonic North America. They're focusing on the hospitals, clinics, personal, and dentists. I think you can see there are different types of products that we have and everything. I think this is a robotic bed, which I was talking about. So this is my last slide anyway. This is a robotic bed. So actually, I can stand here and talk about Panasonic technology and all kinds of things for ages, I think. But I think the main point of this SHAPE event here is to get the opinions and the leadership from key people like yourselves. So I think for Panasonic, we have the technology, we have the manufacturing power, we have everything, but what we need is key luminaries like yourself to come up and tell the industry what it is that you need. So what we're suggesting is, of course, we'd like to hear from you what are the problems and what are the solutions that you're proposing. And I think any solution you want, if you want ultrasound, you want low emission X-rays, we make X-ray panels. We supply a lot of X-ray panels in the United States as well to a lot of the OEM customers. We have a very big project looking at the low emission X-rays. We have a very big projects on ultrasound. We have lots of different projects we're doing. But from Panasonic, I think our commitment to you is that we will, of course, we've sponsored 3 events, and we'll continue to sponsor SHAPE as we continue this project. And then, of course, we'd like to see in the ESC this August 30th, we will actually try to repeat this event here. We will we invite some of the key people in Europe, and we'll try to link it together with what you're doing here at SHAPE. And we hope that SHAPE will become more of a global push towards prevention of disease. And then the third point is here at EuroPrevent. We promised to Dr. Sainer, who's the chairman of this event, we were the first industry sponsor. And we told him that this is the first year they're looking for industry sponsorship. And we told them that we will be the one to sponsor. So we've taken the main booth and the main lecture. And in Zurich next year, we'll have 100 bicycles that say Panasonic Healthcare and Prevention. And of course, we can, if it's up to you, but if you want to put SHAPE on there as well, of course, we're welcome to let you do that. So I think from Panasonic, what we'd like to say, of course, is welcome to you all. And we're looking forward to hearing from you all what the problems are, what type of technologies you're looking for. And we'll do our best to support you. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Lynham. It is really a pleasure to hear top 2 or 3 leader in industry come here and tell us that you as opinion leaders, as people put your life for preventing heart disease and doing research all your life, tell us what you want, and we'll put the resources behind it to make that happen. It's truly a pleasure. I've had the pleasure of also communicating with Mr. Lynham and his team at PSEC. I truly value their dedication to this effort, and I look forward to seeing them standing behind their promise. Everybody heard? He said he's going to support SHAPE for quite a few years. I hope that's 10, 20, 30 years. That would be the kind of sponsorship SHAPE needs to get its message out. And our message, as you all know, it's very, very, very simple and clear. You've had cardiovascular risk factors for risk assessment for over 30, 40 years. We believe it's woefully and awfully insufficient. It leaves a large group of asymptomatic atherosclerotic patients unprotected, and we need more than that. And some of you remember, we were here in 2004. At that time, we did not have the name SHAPE. We were AEHA, Association for Eradication of Heart Attack. Very crazy name, 2004. But we sat down here, and we didn't even have a platform to start with. So we just had CRP. We started with CRP and brainstormed and came up with a guideline. 2004, it wasn't very clear. Through so many emails back and forth, probably more than 1,000 emails, we came up with something founded the SHAPE guidelines in 2006. 2006, we were able to publish the shape guidelines. And as some of you probably remember, a lot of criticisms and awareness at the same time. We were called by one of the outspoken self-advocate cardiologist, I don't want to say his name, that we were shameless self-promoters. Well, it was only a matter of time, and MESA trial and several other major research studies that the message that we put out with SHAPE guidelines and task force report in 2004 and subsequently 2007 was truly in line with science, and that was true belief of our pioneering group. Today we're in 2010. It's truly a pleasure to repeat that. We've been in this facility for the third time now, and I look forward to your brilliant intellectual contribution to advancing our cause. Our cause is very simple. We think it's stupid to have heart attack. We have enough tools and technologies to identify individuals at risk of heart attack. We should be able to do what we can do to prevent it. So the eradication of heart attack is our goal, and we're very pleased that Panasonic Corporation, an organization with such a great statute, 94-year-old, I found out recently they're even the largest corporation in the world, the largest employer in 380,000 employees, has decided to put a slide like this. And I know that they are talking now, but I know that they're going to walk the walk as well. And we look forward to seeing that happen. This will be a great contribution to humanity. There are a lot of companies producing products, but if the product can turn the page towards changing lives and saving lives is what matters. And with that, I personally have found this a great cause, and I hope that you will find the same to support this event. Tomorrow we will have a very strict agenda. Tomorrow, 8 o'clock, we'll start beating the drum with scientific data coming from new studies that we didn't know back in 2004 and 2007. And we build enough momentum towards the end of the day. Hopefully we'll have a new updated SHAPE Task Force 2 agenda. I must say that tomorrow will not be the final. It will be circulated to all people who have contributed and want to contribute through emails. So we'll be in touch through many, many emails. And plan is to get it published in a peer-reviewed journal and peer-reviewed fashion. And hope we will look back 5 years from now to this event and say we made history and we've done a great contribution to the field of preventive cardiology. With that, I'd like to thank you very much for making this event. I know some of you were on family vacation. Some others couldn't make it because of the very same reason. The fact that you made it is a great honor and contribution to the field. We will be starting right at 8, so please plan on getting your breakfast done much sooner than 8. Dr. Shaw is going to come with some kind of whip, and he's going to be very strict on timetables. The agenda is very clear. We want to talk about science, new stuff. We're not going to lecture here to anybody. We're all lecturers. We have been giving talks all our life. So we're not coming here to give talks to everybody else that are part of our own peer group. We're here to talk about key findings, new findings, and we want to discuss them and their merits in the SHAPE 2 guidelines and how we can move the cause and be able also to be more accepted, which is evidence-based approach. With that, thank you very much. Enjoy the rest of your dinner, and if you haven't done some of those delicious cholesterol-free desserts, help yourself, and we'll see you tomorrow morning. Thank you.
That's the doctor's order. A leading cardiologist.
Leading preventive cardiologist.
Yeah, you recommend. I'm in there. Get that opportunity to work. Can I get you something? No. So what do you think, Val?
Pretty good meeting. Very some good information. It's good. You get that out.
We're going to start our marathon. And it will be a long marathon, as you have seen through the agenda. We're planning to work through lunch. In between, hopefully our chairman will be able to give us a few minutes of live break, but that's really what we can expect for today, and that's where we hope we will be ending today with a fruitful discussion. Dr. Shaw will explain the discipline and logistics of presentation. I just want to make sure that you know there are several laptops here that we just switch between laptops. Also, there is internet access. If you have not been connected, that access passcode is given by our team right here. This is just write that password down if you haven't, and you'll be connected to the internet. So with that, I'd like to ask our chairman to please take the podium, and we look forward to a very productive discussion.
Since there is no podium, I'll just stand here. I didn't realize this was such a formal meeting. I would have dressed better for it. But let me also extend a warm welcome to each and every one of you. I know many of you have come from distant places and from across the ocean, so we know Evans Marina Calder actually used to live here about 20 years ago. My staff regressions. We have a pretty full agenda for this morning as well as for tomorrow. And it's my pleasure to open the meeting with the program. I think those of you who were present at the first SHAPE meeting about 4 years ago, we had very contentious debate, but ultimately a consensus. And that consensus is really capsulized in this slide here. That was the outcome of the first SHAPE meeting, a strategy for identifying subclinical atherosclerosis. And this spawned a fair bit of controversy among our own colleagues as well as others, both in the media and in academia. And I must say that we've come a long ways in the last 4 years. There's gradual, slow, reluctant, but ultimate acceptance of this concept or paradigm that we need to do better than just an inventory of risk factors to identify at-risk individuals. And this paradigm shift is gradually occurring, and our goal in the next 2 days is to really embellish this with updates on what's new, how things have changed since the last 4 years, and how we can actually improve our recommendations and guidelines and algorithms so that we can do even a better job of identifying at-risk individuals. And it's been a labor of love for Morton Agavi, myself, Erwin Falk, Dan Berman, Harvey Hecht, and many others who have put in their time and effort to really passionately delve into this arena. And we've been criticized and called all kinds of names by our colleagues. But I think we must push on because we really believe that this is a worthwhile cause. And I can't think of anyone better than Erling Falk to really get us started. He was one of the pivotal members of our first task force, helped write the guidelines that became, that ultimately got published in AJC. And Irving is going to review for us how we got there and where we need to go and what's different and new today than what it was 4 years ago. So, Professor Falk.
Thank you, PK, for the introduction. Let me see if I can have my slides up there. No, it's not mine. Here it was. Yes. Okay. First, a few slides about the background. In Circulation 2003, this consensus paper was published, From Vulnerable Black to Vulnerable Patients, a call for new definition and risk assessment strategies. The problem was, and still is, that available screening and diagnostic methods are insufficient to identify the victims before the event occurred. We can find those VP, vulnerable black, vulnerable patients, vulnerable populations, at high risk for a near-term event. Part 2 of this consensus paper appeared a week later in Circulation, and then after 3 years, this paper appeared as a supplemental to the American Journal of Cardiology, Part 3 of From Vulnerable Black to Vulnerable Patients, now known as the SHAPE guideline, dealing with screening for subclinical arterial disease, or in principle subclinical atherosclerosis, at least at that time. Let's see what development has occurred since these guidelines as I see it. The problem still persists, so there is no change here. If we look at this paper analyzing a lot of admissions to hospitals for acute coronary syndrome, we can see that 21% of patients admitted with a heart attack did not receive lipid-lowering therapy. And if we see of those that did not have any symptoms of prior disease or diabetes, that's a population in primary prevention. Only 14.2% did receive lipid-lowering therapy at the time of admission. So we still have a problem. We cannot identify the high-risk patients before it's too late. Probably because most of them have average level of risk factors and consequently, according to current guidelines, are considered to be low or intermediate risk and not offered appropriate preventive treatment. What about risk assessment? 3 years ago, when we were gathered here for the first guideline, we talked about odds ratio, or ROC curve, and CRP. Now we have more to consider when we have to evaluate or assess a new biomarker in risk assessment. Now we have to focus on meaningful reclassification, or whether the biomarker is clinically useful. And many require a randomized clinical trial to document clinical usefulness. Last year, this paper appeared in American Heart Scientific Statement on the criteria of evaluation of novel markers of cardiovascular risk. A very good paper, and we can see here what is focused on in particular. It's the effect of patients' management and outcome and cost effectiveness of new biomarkers. Also, last year, a series of papers appeared from the US Preventive Service Task Force regarding recommendations for preventive screening. They assessed 9 new biomarkers and none passed the test because they set a new standard. They require that these screening biomarkers should be able to do a clinically meaningful reclassification by focusing on patients with intermediate risk, and this biomarker's ability to upgrade an individual so that the individual would receive appropriate treatment so that we can prevent heart attack. This paper also appeared recently from a workshop sponsored by the National Heart, Lung and Blood Institute on outcome research in cardiovascular imaging, focusing also on screening the asymptomatic patient for coronary artery disease. And this flow diagram suggested a way of a randomized trial could be done, also focusing on the asymptomatic patients with intermediate risk. So patients with intermediate risk is in focus. A new cardiovascular disease prevention paradox has appeared. It was described last year by Fuster in this editorial in Nature Review Cardiology. Mortality has declined dramatically in recent years, but paradoxically, the prevalence of cardiovascular disease and the cost of treating manifest atherosclerotic cardiovascular disease is increasing despite or maybe because of great advances in technology and treatment. So, people live longer with the disease, survival is prolonged, and it has become a chronic disease that is very costly to treat. So, the only thing to come out of this dilemma is in fact to prevent the first heart attack, to prevent healthy people from becoming patients and admitted to the hospital. And in fact, this paper also appeared earlier this year, and cardiovascular disease was the top 2, 3, and 4 responsible for hospital cost in the United States. Number 2 was PCI, number 3 were coronary bypass surgery, and number 4 was pacemakers and implantable defibrillators, all related to ischemic heart disease, atherosclerotic cardiovascular disease. So hospital cost is increasing despite decreasing mortality. But at the same time, for primary prevention, now, for the first time, we have effective, safe, and cheap generic drugs. In fact, you can buy effective treatment for $10, it will last for 3 months. And it has documented efficacy, and it's with very few side effects. And many more will appear in the year to come. In Denmark, we will only have to give 7 pence for simvastatin 4 milligrams. And next year, the world's best-selling drugs, atorvastatin, will be generic. And a lot of other very effective drugs, some of the most effective drugs in history, ACE inhibitors are already generic, and angiotensin receptor blocker will become generic. And they are very effective in lowering the blood pressure. So now we have a good tool to prevent this disease if we can find the people who need the treatment. And what is very interesting was this paper by Scott Grundy in Circulation, where he was in fact determined the threshold for drug consideration of the ATP3 guideline, where he said this threshold was based on cost-effectiveness calculation, assuming a drug price that was 20 times the current cost of generic statin. It was what determined the threshold for drug intervention at that time. And we say the cost of drugs per se are no longer the critical issue. So, I look forward to see the ATP4 guideline. What will the threshold be for drug intervention? Will it be more liberalized? Will it be lowered? Now we have drugs that have proven to be safe, effective, and is extremely cheap. And it will be available for public review in the spring next year. I think we also should consider that, discussing the SHAPE guideline, what will happen in the future when we have all these very effective and cheap drugs for primary prevention. A final word about screening, because we suggested screening in the first SHAPE guideline, screening for subclinical atherosclerosis. P.K. Sharp had this very fine paper in JACC a few weeks ago, screening asymptomatic subject for subclinical atherosclerosis. But he also say here, in selected populations. So, what is screening? And there's a lot of confusion about screening. And if people don't define the word screening, we can very easily misunderstand each other. And in fact, in the commentary or editorial by Lauer, you cannot see it, but he talked about routine screening, routine screening, routine screening. I don't know if it's what PK talks about, He talks about screening in selected population. Is it routine screening? I don't know. We have routine screening, universal screening, organized screening, systematic screening, mass screening, opportunistic screening, case finding. It is what we're doing in Europe. The guidelines don't recommend screening for risk factors in Europe, but they recommend opportunistic screening or case finding. And then we have selected or selective screening. Go back to the first SHAPE guideline. What do we recommend? We recommend screening for heart attack prevention and education program in a selected population at risk about a certain age, but all about an even higher age should receive unconditional treatment. And I think it's, and people at very low risk should not undergo screening, because if they are at extremely low risk, with extremely low risk factor level, they are at low risk. So in fact, in the first SHAPE guideline, I think we recommended, in fact, selected screening and not universal screening. Thank you for that. I have one slide more than I finished. I think. Okay, the last slide here, I just will draw your attention to the bioimage study by the High Risk Flag Initiative. The study design and objective was published a few months ago in the American Heart Journal. Many of you already know about the study. I just will mention that the last patient was included June last year, and in this study we screened more than 6,000 patients for or individual. It was a population screening because they were asymptomatic for subclinical atherosclerosis with ABI, coronary calcification score, ultrasound for abdominal aortic aneurysm, and carotid ultrasound of the carotid artery. And we already now have more than 150 events, so we will soon be able to present some association between screening markers and events for atherosclerotic cardiovascular disease. We have nearly as many events already now as they had in the MESA study published in the New England Journal of Medicine on coronary calcification just a few years ago. And I also would like to mention that a few months ago, this was posted on our website, immediate request for study proposal. BG Medicine and the High Risk Flag Initiative extend an invitation to participate in advancing the landmark bioimage study research. We are inviting all to use our data. If you have a good proposal, we have a form available on our website where you can apply to have access to imaging data, blood sample, clinical information from this study, so we can collaborate and advance the knowledge in this area to the benefit of patients. Thank you.
Although Erling was supposed to talk for 2 hours, he was so efficient that he gave his talk in 10 minutes. I think more deliberately put a long time block here so that we will have time for discussion. And so Erling's presentation is open for discussion, and we can have anybody make any comments or before we go down.
I'd like to start with a few comments. So Erling said since SHAPE 1, could you go back to the SHAPE guideline? Since SHAPE 1, things that have changed and things that have not changed. Things that have not changed is the problem. And very cleverly said, out of that 136,000 patients arrived in emergency room, according to American Heart Association, to get with the guideline report, only 14% who were not coronary heart disease before, only 14% of them were untreated. 86% of people are not getting treatment. Those people what we consider vulnerable patients. So that is really the core of SHAPE. This population, if they get treated, a significant portion of them could benefit from the therapy. So that's where I'd like to get the 1 point from Ernie. Then the other thing contradictory is that we don't have a very effective therapy. We have partially effective therapy, and that's a stat, correct?
No, I don't think so. Later today we're going to talk about the Pull-Pill principle, and I will give a presentation to just 5 minutes. And if you believe in law and more, they say 80% can be reduced by giving a full pill that contains these drugs that lower cholesterol level and blood pressure.
Okay, let's open that to discussion.
So,
Let's open that to discussion. We think the number need to therapy or number need to save one patient for statin, at least in an intermediate population, is about 200. 200 people need to be treated to save one life. How are we saying that we have an effective treatment? Okay?
Well, I think the facts are that with the most comprehensive currently available treatment, and especially treatment begun in the middle age and older age groups, the relative risk reduction at best is 40%, which means 60% of cardiovascular events are currently not being prevented by aggressive medical management. Now, part of the problem is that treatment is initiated too late in the evolution of the disease. And this actually brings me back to the point that if we really want to make a huge impact on this disease, we need to target children and adolescents and identify disease and risk at a much earlier age, because there's no doubt that if we intervene very early in the evolution of this disease, the impact on outcome will be magnified. And so part of the problem why the therapies are not perfect is the initiation of treatment occurs way too late in the course of the disease. And we're not catching people when the disease is really beginning. And that could be another topic for discussion. Should screening be shifted to a younger population, especially if you can do it completely non-invasively without any risk to the patient suffering? So, yes.
Go ahead.
Well, the other concept that naturally follows from this, and I think people like Mike Davidson and others are experts in this, is this whole concept of residual risk, the risk that we leave on the table using statins alone. So just because we get LDL low with statin, which is very effective for lowering, it's not necessarily true that we lower the other contributors to risk. First of all, ApoB can remain high, so other particles, atherogenic particles, inflammation, all the other things, sleep apnea, other contributors to risk. So a major concept in the lipidology conferences has been beyond LDL reduction and more aggressive use of combination therapy based on biomarkers and advanced lipid tests and other things that we can be doing. So this is in addition to the issues that PK just brought up.
Okay, so Peter, maybe you could comment on that. The point is therapeutic modalities available to us, non-invasive therapeutic modalities, primarily statin and a little bit of HDL elevating therapy, which is still under question. Do we have enough, if we do a good job of a screening and identifying the risk population, to say that we can reduce the risk of therapy, risk of event by 80%?
So, yes, thanks. I'm here as the representing individual, but also the National Lipid Association president. I think that what I really liked about the first shape was identifying those that need to be treated more aggressively. But the long-term mandate would really, I'd like to see it go beyond at the very end there when you talk about getting below 70 LDL. If the mandate would expand that to looking at other non-HDL ApoB and then intensify therapy, and especially lifestyle. That would be one of the important messages I think that we should continue to emphasize in those patients. That maybe a really good follow-on to shape 1 is to get down to the intensification of therapy and really push lifestyle changes, weight loss, and exercise. I think everyone would be comfortable with that. I think what the problem, although I am an advocate for comprehensive management, many argue that the evidence data is not quite there yet for adding on another drug on top of the statin. So, I know this is controversial anyway, so you may want to kind of at least make the point and recommend intensive therapy initiating with greater lifestyle changes for those type of patients. And it's a very difficult problem because their LDL 70, but their ApoB is 100, their particle number is 2,000, and they still got a lot of risk that's not been effective.
Maybe we should frame the discussion in two kind of discrete ways. One, focusing on identification and what can we do better in identifying risk. And then the second component is what can we do better to mitigate that risk. So leave them separate so we don't kind of mix the two. So let's focus on identification first. How to do a better job of identifying individuals at risk beyond what was recommended.
Beyond what is here. And you know, the major filter right there is the age. You'll see star 45 in male and 55 in female. And keep that in mind, we were thinking of cost effectiveness being an issue. We're recommending widespread screening at that time, coronary calcium.
I think since the shape 1, we have now the full data of MESA and the Jobrico study is finished. So we have really 2 observational studies which can be used in order to look to these data. And when I checked it again, I think we have to do some changes in step 2. First point would be that we have to think about really the cutoff values, as the absolute calcium score seems to be as good as the 75% percentile, which is for some people a little bit difficult to understand and to take into the daily practice. And the second point is that I think we have a shift in the IMT. I can later show also from the Jobrico studies the results of IMT measurements comparable to these calcium scoring. And here this level of 1 millimeter is too high. And at the moment, I think we have to really readjust it. In our hands, 0.79 was the cutoff where the quartiles were separating those who are at high risk. So this would be for the scheme, I think, new findings.
Great. I think we should just start from Matt, because Matt is right at the beginning of the table. Matt, let's go from you. What would you change here?
So I agree with Erling. We could probably work on step 2. I think we should change step 1 a little bit. I think we get a lot of pushback when we publish this for only excluding very low-risk patients. If we look at reclassification, I know Paolo's going to talk about this later, but if we talk about reclassification with imaging, either IMT or calcium scored, very low-risk patients do not get reclassified to high risk. So if we put in Framingham 5% and up, or 6% and up, which is what the ACC is going to recommend, we don't exclude many people, because you already have age in the top line, but people have lost that. People say, oh, you're only excluding 20-year-old marathon runners, and you miss the age part of it. So if we change it to Framingham 6% and up, we wouldn't be excluding many people. Framingham 1 to 5%. You can't reclassify those with imaging. That's been shown a few times now. Erling has data as well to show that we just can't reclassify very low-risk patients, and that's where we got all the pushback from SHAPE. So I would start at step 1, make it Framingham 6% and higher, and then go from there, and you'll get no pushback from anybody. The ACC will be on board, and you'll have very little resistance. Then whatever we do beyond that is not as argumentative.
That's a good point. Stay right there. So over there, you just changed the screening criteria. Would you change the age?
No, I think the ages are great, but you can get rid of the ages if you do step 1. Instead of in the green box it says very low risk, you say Framingham less than 6%.
But now you'd be excluding a lot of women who are at risk.
Right.
Well, even in MESA, we can't reclassify those, right? So MESA was, at least from the calcium score data, very robust, and we still couldn't reclassify those patients. So I don't see the data to support.
Well, I think we're going to the dilemma. If we're looking at MESA or any 5-year study, we come to the dilemma that the drive behind the first SHAPE guideline was identifying the vulnerable patient who are at risk of a near event. A near event, Matt is right, you can't reclassify female. But if we're going later, Howard is going to talk about lifetime risk. We're expanding, or PK is expanding our horizon for true prevention. Then that's not just a vulnerable patient. That's lifetime risk of becoming the heart attack victim. In that case, they meant we can change the age because we're having a different goal. That's not the goal of reducing it in the next 5 years.
Right, but if you have women at a minimum of 55, you're already have some risk.
They
based on
have
framing.
lots of flags.
So I don't think you're going to miss that many, right? I mean, by going to 6%, if you already have a minimum age. So I don't know, we'd have to look at the numbers, but I'll bet you it would be worth the loss of a few percent of patients to not get the incredible pushback that we've gotten time and time again.
Maybe when we get to talk, PK, when we get to talk about this shift to early detection, we can talk about the age. Should we
Any other
move around?
comments?
I think we should be moving around.
That's the,
Yeah.
If you look at the reanalysis of data that was recently published by NAMBI on Eric's study, where they did the 15-year follow-up, the reclassification occurred in the low risk group. So in men, it occurred in about 8% of people, where they were moved from the very low risk to an intermediate risk, and it occurred in about 5% of women. Now, granted that very low risk never moved to the very high risk, and very high risk never moved down to the very low risk, but you nevertheless did, move 5 to 8% of people.
Okay, that's important.
Can I make a comment?
Yes.
So it seems to me thinking about this from a sort of more molecular perspective, which is what I do. You really need to ask, are there a small group, and it's a very small fraction of people who are at low risk by current factors, if any one of them you want, or any combination you want, who you could pick out either by genetics or by other factors to identify them in a facile, cost-effective way. That technology is moving extremely quickly, and probably 5 years from now, the answer is yes. I'm not sure it's true today. Robert thinks it's true today. But I think you have to ask, is it that we want to identify that men under 45, women under 55, where there are very few people as a percentage, but because it's a very large group, there's a lot of people who have events? Or are we saying we're not as effective as we need to be in the higher risk groups, where you need to identify better biomarkers? And they're two very different questions that I think one needs to think about in terms of where you want to put your emphasis.
PK, can I make a comment
Yes.
about your comment? And so I think you were right on, but we could add something to this guideline that I think would be medically logical and position shaped to be embraced by the large medical community, and that involves family members. So one thing we don't have here is you identify the proband of the person with coronary disease, and if we pull Arthur Agassiz into this, he's done fabulous things in Miami with dietary changes in schools. So you have a very low-risk intervention, diet, metabolic syndrome thing for the children of people with, you picked up premature disease in. So if we add that, we could bring in the support of the pediatric community, and politically it might be a very wise thing to do. I'm sure Arthur would be happy to contribute to that.
Robert, you're absolutely correct. We were discussing it yesterday at the board meeting, and I think the next big step is actually really focusing on children and adolescents, and by whatever means we can identify them. And I think your suggestion of taking those who are identified and looking at their family members is an excellent one. It's kind of a low-hanging fruit in terms of you don't have to do a whole lot to pick those out. And so it's right on, absolutely agree.
As a modification of Matt's comment about, which I think is excellent, about Framingham, the Achilles heel, of course, is going to be those women, for example, and men who are underserved because they have a family history. So if you had to do something, whether it's a Reynolds score or something like that, I would think that we don't want to miss the 40-year-old female who would have been a Framingham 3, but her father and mother died in their late 40s or 50s. So I think there should be a simple way of incorporating at least family history as the real deficiency of Framingham.
Instead of Framingham 6% renal.
Right.
Yeah, I was going to say a similar thing. Framingham 6% or family history of premature coronary disease.
Okay. We're going to go down this line. The line.
Harvey?
No, this man is
Oh,
here.
Steve. Steve before us.
Steve.
want to follow up on your point about DJ economic study on Baylor. Yeah, I was impressed with that too. This up here is the ERIC study, 15-year follow-up, 1,800 events. And I will go through briefly when I talk to you, but this is to your point. The inclusion of a plaque by the Manheim criteria of 1.5 millimeters changed the both reclassification, net reclassification, both upwards and downwards, as you can see here. And this is really all I want to say. It worked both ways very effectively.
Wait, Steve, so see that real quick? So just look at the top. Less than 5%, less than equal to 5%?
Yeah.
0 patients made it to 10%. 0. So we didn't make one person go from very low to intermediate. Forget about very, no. Intermediate. 0 made it to intermediate. So just to revisit, I agree with Mort that the goal of SHAPE may be lifetime risk, but cost effectiveness data is going to be based on this type of data, and 0 made it out of the very low. So we may be safe with excluding less